see.
My colleagues,
Where is, because my display is damaged.
I really don't want to be here because I think that we are not representing the state of Arkansas well as a body when we even take up consideration of a bill which has the direct, overt intent to repress voter presentation and representation. And it is very clear that that's what this bill is all about. We're here as public representatives to try to promote the best interests of the state of Arkansas. I think everybody took an oath to do that. And when we come to this body, we interact with each other and we respect each other based upon at least one belief, and that is we all committed to the development and promotion of this state of Arkansas. And when I interact with you all, I am sincere as I speak with you, and as I share my views with you, and as I oppose and or support your bills. And I smile, and you smile, and we're all smiling faces. But smiling faces mean different things, because good faith and good intent should accompany smiling faces in this body. And I do not like to be in a situation where one of us applauds the other, and pats him or her on the back, and then at the same time takes a metal instrument and wields it in such a way as to take away a fundamental right,
Metal instrument.
none of which is more important than the right to vote. I don't say that lightly, but most of you who sit here don't have my color or my history, and you've never been deprived or denied the right to vote, nor have you had to endure the hardship of an impediment to it. Remember, the 13th Amendment was about citizenship, but then we started talking about the right to vote. And even though my people couldn't vote then, the right became imbued in law. And then it took a long time for us to get it. And after then, there were, in the respective primaries, Democratic and Republican, efforts to try to repress that vote. And that there were different ways. You came up with all kinds of rules. But that was not ever done on the basis of the majority race. It was all intended initially against people of my color and against women. I noticed some of you women have signed on to this bill, but it wasn't not too long ago that you couldn't vote either. And it's only now that you're beginning to vote, and you still don't have your proper numbers in this chamber, and you don't have your proper numbers in the House nationally. You have 55% of the vote, and you have 10 to 20% of the representation. We are not a representative country. Now, under the circumstances, when you have the repression, it continues to play out so as to entrench and to keep in place those who are in place. And I say to you that this is not what Arkansas is about, as we seek to have two-party government in Arkansas. Two-party government ought to be more respectful of fundamental rights, such as the right to vote. The poll tax was intended to be against me. Registration was intended to be against me, but we weren't like Mississippi, Alabama, and the other voter rights states. But now we are joining them. And why do we have to join Mississippi and Alabama on everything? I mean, I understand some northern states want to do it too, but that's about political power. And I guess political power means that you can smile and you can keep on going, and then you can deny fundamental rights. But in this situation, what we have here is, first of all, contrary to what Representative Lee says, there is no objective showing that there is voter fraud that is traceable to a race of people that is substantial. But when we start talking about fraud and things like that, fraud is evident in many places. Nobody talks about putting businesses out of business, corporations out of business when they engage in deceiving, things like that. I mean, would you say that because General Motors engaged in deceptive practices, they should be excluded or they should be put out of business? No, you don't want to say that. You tailor the legislation to deal with the problem that you have. And that there is no correlation between this legislation and what you have tailored. I noticed that they supported some nice people. At least I've determined that you all who pat me on the back and smile and I smile back are nice people. But I noticed one thing. Most of you live a particular place and don't have the problems that exist in my neighborhood or in my section of the state. And I call that neighborhood that area that begins up around West Memphis and comes down to Little Rock on Highway 40 and then goes south on Highway 30 to Texarkana. Everything to the south of those two lands is beginning to be desolate and in despair. And on the other side, Representative King, Representative Burrs, Representative Meeks, Representative Harris, those areas are prospering. But you don't prosper at the expense of harming section of the state. It is not lost on me that the sponsors of this bill, almost to a person, live to the north of those parameters that I set out. They live to the north of Interstate 40 or to the north of Interstate 30. Look at the list. I spoke with Mr. McCreary and he said that while he's on here and he lives in Lone Oak, he's one person who does not live to the north. There may be one or two other exceptions. But it's easy for other people to try to set the standards in a biracial community, which is in need of evolution and progress, when the effort is something else. I ask you all on this side, I call it this side, I have more Republicans on this side than Democrats on this, but I ask that you all at least don't go with a bill like this because it doesn't accomplish anything. It does some other things that are really harmful. It makes a poll watcher an agent of the state. A poll watcher who can look at who's authorized to look at a signature, can see whether that person's signature matches with the person who appears. So that person is making a judgment of whether that is the same person. But if the person decides that he doesn't want to accept one's identification, all he has to do is say, "You're not that person." And then that imposes a burden of proof upon that person to show that he is. And there's no way that that person has for overcoming that, and other than to necessarily go to court. But then if the poll watcher mischievously or negligently or for ulterior motives decides to just challenge votes indiscriminately, then that person becomes a state agent, in my opinion. But can he be sued? Are you all authorizing a right of private action against a poll watcher? I don't think you want to do that. I do think, though, that it all comes back down to one thing. Do you respect the way that the law on voting has evolved? Do you respect the fact that in Arkansas, too few people vote, and that too few of those people who don't vote happen to be poor? Mostly poor people who live in Delta and poor areas in Northwest Arkansas. You want to have more people participate in government, you say, but you do not do anything to promote that. You take away and cause them to be subjected to punishment. Our history suggests that we are better than these people. Our interaction with each other suggests that we can do better. And that we don't have to say to people, unless we have an evidentiary basis for our action, that we are going to go and take some action on the basis of speculation or what may have appeared to have happened in some other state. on the basis of there being no evidence in this state of any people in substantial, in any reasonable numbers abusing the process, then there's just no basis for this. On the basis of the history of participation in the state of Arkansas in terms of voting where you want more people to vote, there's no basis for trying to limit the right to vote. And the only thing that it does is it sends a message, and all due respect to some of you who may not have thought about it, Representative Woodward, sends a message to me and Representative Armstrong, Williams, others, that we are not really your peers. And our people whom we represent are not as important as your people. And therefore, we have to take what you give. We've come too far to allow the right to vote to be so compromised. I ask you all to this time overcome your own designations of support for this bill, and also the fact that you can carry it, and this one time, give it an opportunity, give yourselves an opportunity to do something for the people, all the people of the state of Arkansas, notwithstanding the fact that you don't live with the people who would be the victims of this bill.
Representative Wilkins, for what purpose?
Question, Mr. Speaker.
You recognize.
Mr. Walker, you've been around a long time. You've read a lot of law, haven't you?
Yes, sir.
Are you aware that in the last primary we had in Arkansas, 21% of the people voted?
I am.
In the last general election, I think we had something over 60%. And given your background in a lot of civil rights issues, a lot of legal issues that have affected this state, would you agree that this bill is designed to make it harder for people to vote?
Well, here's my response to that. The voter turnout in the primary was more or less normal. Well, it was low. But the reason so many people here got discombobulated is because you had a black president on the ballot. And so many of you wanted to make your case against him in order to send other messages and to make sure that somehow or another this doesn't happen again. Now look, we're not going to have another Obama for a long time. But the point is that when you have the opportunity to vote, people ought to go and vote and not be limited. The vote is too low here, 15%, 20%, and in a general election, which is controversial, 60% is absolutely too low. In most civilized and most democratic countries of European nature, the voter participation is much higher.
Representative Nichols, for what purpose?
Question.
You recognize.
Representative Walker, would you give us a little history lesson on the Emancipation Proclamation?
I don't want to do what took place right before on the movie bill, but I will say that most of us here are familiar with the Emancipation Proclamation. I see Representative Clemmer, she's a teacher, and some others. And we know, all of us know about slavery. And some of us here are the direct beneficiaries of that slavery, because black people never really benefited from slavery. So some of the people who have run for office here have indicated that we did. But in terms of emancipation, we've been trying to get first-class status as citizens and human beings since 1863, when President Lincoln set forth the Emancipation Proclamation. Now, it's still not here. You can look at everything that we do, and you'll find that there's underrepresentation of black people in anything good and overrepresentation of anything that is bad. So in terms of the Emancipation Proclamation, the idea has to be that we are not free until all of us are enjoying the prospects and the prosperity of this country. Thank you.
Representative Walker spoke against the bill. Does anyone wish to speak for the bill?